Welcome to History Sleuth, a podcast exploring the involvement of history and culture in current events. My name is Adelaide, and today we're starting up season 2 of this podcast with a look at where we've been and what's next for a project that I'm doing. But before we get into that, if you're on Twitter, follow me at Sleuth History to get updates about when I post new episodes, and make sure also to follow History Sleuth on Spotify, Apple, or wherever you get your podcasts. So, wow, I guess I don't even know where to begin. I already recorded a version of this episode with lots of other things in it. I was going to look at, like a silly PragerU video that they had put up recently, but so much has happened in between when I recorded that and just now that I feel like I want to take a look at that. Something that I've discovered in making this podcast is that disinformation, misinformation, just lying about things in general, lying about history, lying about current events is really dangerous because words are really powerful. So I guess some things that I wanted to include in this episode, why I'm re-recording it. Obviously, as I'm recording this is January 12th, and so just last week we had people invading the Capitol with violent intent, wearing a lot of Trump regalia, if you will, and we assume that those people are Trump supporters. We had our president banned from Twitter, which I think is really interesting and kind of relates to all of this. And there are talks about impeaching him a second time, whether or not that is necessary. And then also just concern over what's going to happen with this transition of power when Trump's time in office comes to a close and when Biden takes over. I mean, hopefully that is peaceful, but apparently we are not guaranteed anything. Things have been crazy. And so I have a few thoughts. First off, I've taken a while before I've posted another episode, longer than I thought I would, because I got some criticism about my podcast from someone very close to me, someone that I very much respect and admire, and it was criticism that was really hard to hear, and so I wanted to really just take some time and take that seriously, look at the work that I've done, and make sure that it's work that I am proud of and work that I stand by. I want to be careful with the things that I say to make sure that I'm always encouraging other people, and when I'm correcting them, that I'm not doing so in a way that is degrading or insensitive or insulting. It is never my goal to be insulting, though I deal with topics that are difficult and things that I'm really passionate about, and oftentimes that relates to things that make me angry. I often have a very angry response in the topics that I cover. I do want to make sure that while in some cases, in most cases, I would argue my anger is justified, I do want to make sure that I am being kind to the people that I'm criticizing or calling out for being dangerous. Even just because they're saying things that are ridiculous or dangerous doesn't mean that they're not human beings who are valued and worthy of respect. Sometimes that's hard to remember. And hard to act on for sure. But that is something that I want to continue doing. And so that's a goal that I have for this next season or so, or starting season 2 of History Sleuth. I want to make sure that I'm always kind, even when people are doing dangerous things. Yeah, so that's a big thing moving forward. I also took a little bit of time just because of current events and all of those things, and I feel like a lot of it relates to the kinds of things that my podcast has started doing or pulling apart, this kind of like disinformation, people making comments about history to support their political views or whatever their agendas may be. That's the kind of stuff that I've been calling out on this podcast with. I've talked a lot about the 1619 Project and people's reactions to that, and that has been really interesting. I definitely want to dig more into that, but there seem to be more pressing things at the moment. And also on this podcast, I've talked a lot about the lost cause rhetoric, the pseudo-historical narrative of the lost cause that is a little bit older than some of the other lies that we see about history, but still prevalent, interestingly, and I think it does relate to the kinds of things that we see today. I've also addressed PragerU videos a lot. And it might seem that I'm picking on them, or that I go into watching those videos with a bias already. And that's true, that's fair. I am biased. I do expect them to say historically inaccurate things, but they do it every time. And I keep calling them out every time because I very strongly believe that misinformation is very dangerous. And misinformation includes not only the information itself, but the way in which it's presented and the truths that people choose to tell, picking and choosing from the truth. True individual facts can be stitched together to create an overall narrative that is false. And so it can be difficult to kind of wade into those sorts of things and pull it apart and do it well. And PragerU does this kind of misinformation where they take true facts, but present them in a way that fits their own agenda while ignoring facts that don't fit their own agenda. And that's still misinformation, even when they're using things that are true. I remember I saw this presentation, I think I was in elementary school. It was from our librarians about misinformation. So they showed us this website about tree octopuses, or octopi, I don't know what the plural of octopus is, whatever. So they had a picture of an octopus in a tree, and then a list of facts about them next to it, like where they lived and what they ate. And it all looked pretty real. Like, this octopus was just like in a tree, and I was 9, and this was an authority figure, so I was like, sure, tree octopuses exist. I don't know. There are lots of animals that I didn't know about at that time. Like, who's to say that tree octopuses don't exist? But after the librarian showed us the website and read some of the facts to us, she asked us, she was like, do you think tree octopuses are real? And lots of us, not just me, lots of us certainly thought they were real, because the website seemed to know what it was talking about. There was a picture of one right there, and it was an authority figure that was sharing this with us. So, like, how could it not be real? And then the librarian stopped and she showed us how she put the website together, the pictures she used to Photoshop this, like, tree octopus together, and told us not to believe everything we see on the internet. And so that's something that's really stuck with me. I started this podcast because I'm suspicious of the way that people use history to achieve their own ends, whether that be a political statement, a movie, or an interpretation of historical events. A tree is a real thing, an octopus is a real thing, but they don't go together. It's the same with historical events and current events. Both have happened or are happening, but it's up to a good historical interpretation incorporating all the facts and perspectives to decide whether those events go or don't go together. And so that's a big thing when we're looking at the events of January 6th of this year, of all the people that were storming the Capitol. I've seen a lot of takes on this, heard a lot of things where people are comparing this riot, or however you want to define it, to the Black Lives Matter protests. I've seen people using language or making comments that compares the events of January 6th to, like, the French Revolution and storming the Bastille, which I'm very suspicious about. I've seen a lot of different takes on it. And interestingly, when it happened, when I was seeing the news of this, I wasn't entirely surprised. I don't know, maybe if it's just from doing this podcast, I've seen how lies and continually lying about something can create actions and, like, real effects. It's not just, like, words don't just exist and then disappear, you know? Words have power, especially if this group of people was told over and over and over again that, like, Trump actually won the election and they need to do something about it to make sure that that actually goes through. Like, it kind of makes sense how they would have come to this conclusion. Not that I'm saying that they were right to do anything that they did, or that Trump did win the election. I mean, he definitely lost. So there's a lot of mistakes here. But as far as those people go, I don't feel like they're not like an isolated group, you know? They're not like a crazy group. They were following the words and the beliefs of Trump, which is why he got banned from Twitter for inciting these things. I think there is a direct connection to those things. But I also feel like Trump, his presidency, and the kind of people that he rallies are not like an isolated incident. And so that's what makes me a little bit apprehensive going into this new year, this new presidency and administration. Like, these problems aren't going to go away just because we have a new president. I think there's going to be a lot more of this that we have to deal with. But I have a feeling that once it's not in our face anymore, all over Twitter and in the news every day, what crazy thing has Trump done today, I don't think we're going to pay as much attention to these problems as we have been. Probably because most people are fatigued dealing with all of these crazy things and lies and people that just seem totally out there. So I'm a little worried that this is going to get swept under the rug again. I feel like Trumpism, if you will, is a symptom of a larger problem in America, a larger problem with our country. And so that's what I'm still working on, like pulling apart. I would love to make another episode on it, do some more research and do something a little bit more fully on this idea. But it's just, I mean, it's only, for me right now, it's only been 6 days since that happened. That's not enough time to really understand what happened and the implications of all of this. And I'd like to do an episode too. We'll see how it goes. But like looking at the history of the Trump administration like a history teacher would, and kind of pulling apart like what kind of narrative would a history teacher, like 30, 40 years from now, how would they teach the Trump administration? What policies would they mention? What events would be significant? How would they describe the 2016 election, the 2020 election, the pandemic, all of these things? And it still might be too soon to really do that, but because we're just engulfed in the politics and the current events of it and all of that. I remember when I was in high school, we didn't learn anything about the Obama administration because we were still in it or getting out of it. That transition was happening, and our teacher was like, it's too soon. People are still too passionate about these politics, these different events. They have opinions about these events that kind of blind their historical view of things. They can't really see how it plays in this larger narrative because they already have an opinion of this was good, this was bad, this shouldn't have happened, this was only because of Obama, this was only because of Trump, because we're too close to it. So that's curious. I'm curious about all of those things. We'll see. So what's next for History Sleuths? Where are we going? I just kind of started talking about some ideas that I have and things that I want to do. I definitely want to do a lot for Black History Month. I've got lots of ideas for that. I want to talk in a more like applicable way of how understanding historical tragedies and recognizing them as such leads us to making better choices for our futures, and how refusing to accept those tragedies and recognize them creates more problems. I think that's a really important thing and kind of the drive of my podcast really so far. So I've got some ideas for looking at Black history things and just kind of like researching more and sharing more with you guys what I find along the way, because I don't think that's something that we really spend a lot of time on in general history classes, or something that we're necessarily exposed to a lot in our lives. And there's not something that I know a lot about. I took a class on the Harlem Renaissance this past semester, my last one of college. I'm not a college student anymore. Very exciting. Yeah, and something that really just stuck out to me from that was like, why was the Harlem Renaissance class an upper division course? Why are like classes about Black literature or culture considered in our history department or literature department like non-Western civilizations? And at my university, we had to take a Western Civ class and then like a non-Western Civ class, which is kind of, I mean, the term Western civilization is kind of arbitrary, as we can even see from like the fact that like Latin America is included in the non-Western, but it is in the West physically, but it's considered like a non-Western area of the world. And the same with like the Harlem Renaissance class being considered non-Western when like literally it's happening in America. Like the Harlem Renaissance was in Harlem, which is physically in the West and around the rest of Western civilization. So anyway, that's kind of a tangent, but I think that's interesting and something that we kind of need to point to and be like, why is this? Why don't we include Harlem Renaissance texts with the rest of American lit? Like, just because there's a way that we've always done things doesn't mean that's the way that we should continue to do things. But that's kind of this whole podcast, isn't it? I hope I don't get too redundant in general on all of these things. So I think calling out disinformation and lies is more important than ever. Even with the end of the Trump administration, that's all good and well, but it doesn't mean all of America's problems just magically go away with him. And hopefully he does go away. I guess that's not guaranteed either, is it? But at least he doesn't have a Twitter account anymore. That's definitely helpful. But anyway, if you've been listening along, I think it is, for the most part, all people that I know at this point. I really appreciate it. I started this podcast because I didn't really feel like I had a platform to talk about and express these things, or that I would be like annoying if I did, because not everybody wants to hear about history, and not everybody wants to hear the difficult things about history, and that's really what I try to wrestle with here. So I don't know, if you're listening along, I really appreciate it, and I've enjoyed doing this. I hope that this has been enjoyable to you as well, and that I guess you stick with it going forward. So this will be a shorter episode just because I am mostly unscripted, and I also am more awkward when I don't have a script, as I'm sure you can tell, so I can't talk as long. I usually write absolutely everything out. So here we are. That's all I've got for you guys today. Thank you so much for sleuthing with me. I hope you enjoyed this episode. Don't forget to follow History Sleuth wherever you get your podcasts. I hope you have a great day. Stay sane. Don't spread misinformation. Bye.